New Zealand, this is the last day of the Therapeutic Products Bill, and it's worse than you could ever possibly imagine. In fact, last night I threw a barbecue and I had a number of medical professionals around, and what I heard around the table was quite alarming. In fact, so much that I invited Mark. Mark, thank you very much for coming back to the clinic here to see us. Now, you're a pharmacist. In fact, you even own your own pharmacy in Hornby, Christchurch. And I really respected and enjoyed your concerns about the Therapeutic Products Bill. Would you please share that with us?
Sure. So as well as being a registered pharmacist for over 30 years, I'm also an integrative health practitioner. I've got a master's in integrative medicine, and I also run a private clinic. So I have Stay Well Pharmacy and Stay Well Clinic. And I've been working through this bill for a little while. This mammoth 287 pages of stuff has just become a real thorn in my side, and in many others, for a whole bunch of reasons. This bill and its publicity around it has been pretty poor, actually. There's been no mention in the mainstream media. I've even challenged those that purport to be, outside the mainstream, like Sean Plunkett on the platform, had no response, such that I'm actually, reaching out to the alternative media. And because many of my friends have also said, look, the press have got to get hold of this. The public haven't heard about this. And that's been an advantage for anybody that wants to get this through. But I think the vast majority of the public still have no clue about this. It was originally released for consultation just around Christmas time, which of course is a cunning way of getting something through. And then everyone's been away on holiday. And now they did have it in February, but then they extended it through to March, and that's still insufficient time. There should have been a lot more public debate. There should also have been some real discussion, because anybody that's bothered to read this bill, and the feedback I've had when I've spoken to people about, you need to read this bill, you need to make a submission or an objection, the first response they get is, look, I had a look at it, it was just totally overwhelming. And that's been a real issue.
Now, but I'm a bit confused. You're a pharmacist. You deal with pharmaceutical grade drugs, which would probably already be approved. And when we look at the bill, of course, it's all about safety and protecting you. So why would a pharmacist be concerned about this?
Well, funny, it actually also has definitions of what a pharmacy is. It actually repeals the vast majority of the Medicines Act and the Medicines Regulations. It doesn't touch medicinal cannabis or controlled drugs, which are found in the Misuse of Drugs Act. But there also, of course, pharmacy has a lot of its care is in what this bill refers to as natural health products. And this is basically, they split these therapeutic products into four main categories. So they're either a medicine, and then a medicine has your four main categories. So you've got prescription medicine, pharmacist-only medicine, pharmacy medicine, and then general sale medicine. Then you've got your pharmaceutical ingredients, the APIs. Then you've got your medical appliances, and these could even be things like acupuncture needles are considered a medicinal or a medical device. So they're talking about all those bits and pieces. You've obviously got your blood pressure machines and so on. And then you have your natural health products. And natural health products range in a vast array of things. And these were, up till now, included in the dietary supplement regulations under the Food Act. So, but my big concern, yes, the medicines are being looked at. And I think that was important because some of the old legislation, the Medicines Act, is very old and needs to be upgraded. But what they've done is they've pretty much chucked everything in. And they've admitted that. They call it an omnibus bill, such that they've also got a whole pile of legislation of other pieces of legislation thrown in at the back. And I'll discuss that later on. So I wouldn't call this so much an omnibus bill as a platypus bill, because it's cynically been said that when the universe had some bits and pieces left over, they put them together and made the platypus, which of course has got all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And the Therapeutic Products Bill seems to be a very similar thing to me.
So what are your, in brief, what are your chief concerns?
Look, we could spend hours with my chief concerns. I would say first and foremost, the lack of discussion, the lack of those at large wanting to bring this to public notice. I was at the market, at the Sunday market last Sunday, and everyone I spoke to had very little or no information about this. And there was also such a lot of apathy. I spoke to the lady who was at the Rawleys stand, and I said to her, have you heard about the Therapeutic Products Bill? She hadn't. And then when I mentioned about it, she said, oh, these are all Australian made. I said, well, that's not going to make any difference at all. All of the claims that you've got on all of these products, you're not going to be able to make these claims. Now, on the one hand, as an evidence-based practitioner, I would say, well, maybe that's a good thing. But on the other side, we look at, we don't really understand how detailed this is going to be, to what level it's going to be. We look at the enforcement and the penalties. We look at who's going to be allowed to do it. So perhaps, if I can step back and maybe talk about some individual bits and pieces, because I get a lot of individuals telling me or asking me, look, I'd love to make a submission, but I'm not really sure where to get started. And part of that, of course, is this thing is so convoluted. You're jumping backwards and forwards. I understand that they're going to have a problem.
And what we'll make sure we do is in the description, we'll have links. Although we've sort of got, 12 hours to go from filming this.
Midnight tonight.
Yeah, midnight tonight. So, but we'll put the links into how you can and where to submit your opposition. Yep.
So the first 50 pages are the descriptions. That in itself should make people think, goodness me, 50 pages to try and describe what's going on. The first few pages explain the various bits and pieces. As I mentioned, the four main areas that they talk about within the therapeutic products are medicines, medical devices, active pharmaceutical ingredients, which they call APIs. Those are things that you would then go, as individual ingredients, you would then put into something else or mix together, and then natural health products. And they don't really there's a lot of merging of information. When they talk about the use of some of these things, they also want to clarify what manufacture is, what distribution is, what prescribing is. They talk about controlled activities. And controlled activities are manufacturing, wholesale and non-wholesale supply. So that's where you would be a distributor selling to another business, wholesale, but then there's non-wholesale supply as well, which would include, in fact, giving something to somebody as well without payment. Exporting, so if you've got family overseas that you send things to, that's going to be controlled. Then we have obviously prescribing and dispensing medicines, fair enough, administering medicines and using medical devices. Again, remember I mentioned that medical devices could be something like an acupuncture needle. And then conducting clinical trials, and even the definition of what a clinical trial is, which is listed in here. That potentially could be that if you've got a formulation that you've decided to create and you haven't used it before, or you've used it a couple of times and you give it to 3 or 4 people to say, what do you think? That could be considered a clinical trial. They say in broad terms, no one is allowed to carry on a controlled activity unless a license, permit or provision of subpart 3 of part 3, there we go, there's one of those convoluted things that you've got to move back, allows them to do so. And although therapeutic products are products intended for human use, this Act also controls veterinary activities that involve the use of human medicines or medicinal devices for animal patients. Now, okay, there's already been some rules and regulations around using medicines for animals, and certainly if you're getting a human medicine, it should be prescribed by a vet in order to be used for an animal, and the veterinary control is in here as well. So there's some good stuff in here, But there's a whole lot of fishhooks in here as well. So they talk about a therapeutic product as being a product intended for use in, on, or in relation to humans for a therapeutic purpose. It's a product that regulations refer to in section 19 bar 1 that says it's a therapeutic product. So they'll actually tell you whether they think it's a therapeutic product, even if it doesn't fall into the standard definitions, and a product that is intended for use as an active ingredient of a medicine. Well, that one's fair enough. And if two or more products are intended by the manufacturer to be used together, those products together are a single therapeutic product. Even if some or all of them are sold separately, they wouldn't be a therapeutic product. Like if you've got bits and pieces of a first aid kit, and then you put them together as a final first aid kit. So again, there's some stuff in here that makes sense. There's some interesting stuff here. If you look at clause 18 on naturally occurring things that may be a product, they talk about human blood is not generally regarded as a product. However, if a person donates blood to the New Zealand Blood Service, the collected blood would become a product. As the donated blood is intended for a therapeutic use, it would be a therapeutic product. So, we would have thought that the use of blood is fairly straightforward, but the moment it's out of your body in a bag, it's now no longer blood as such, it's now a therapeutic product, and that's going to be regulated by all the rules and regulations. Now, that I don't know what that's going to mean for the future, whether that's going to be a fishhook or not. They go into natural health ingredients and recognising what is a natural health ingredient. So this is under part 30, and they talk about a substance or mixture of substances obtained by expression, extraction, distillation, purification, and or a traditional preparation of anything referred to in paragraph A, which is a plant material, algae, fungus, or non-human animal material. So that also includes rongoa Māori. That also includes Chinese herbal medicine. That also includes other traditional medicines, that some of which have been used for thousands of years. They also mention by name biotin, which is a B vitamin, choline, folate, which is a B vitamin, and of course folic acid is similar to that, vitamins A, B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B12, vitamin C, D, E, or K, a mineral or mineral compound, so that's your magnesium and your zinc and all of your other trace minerals, an amino acid, so all your bodybuilder, people, and if you're using something for cold sore relief, the lysine, a microorganism whole or extracted, that's interesting, and then a synthetic equivalent of the substances we've just talked about. So they're considering a synthetic version to be equivalent as a natural health product. And then, here's the kicker, anything else the rules say is a natural health product. They then, they talk about preservatives and ingredients. So that the rules around this are not really established well. They talk about compounding of a medicine. They talk about manufacture and manufacturer. And when we're looking at natural health products with that, they're actually talking, so that's part 48. It's disturbing because manufacture of natural health products is anything that does the following: produce it, or anything that is part of the process of producing it. Well, that would also mean planting seeds, fertilizing the soil, bringing it to its final state, testing, for example, testing, sterilizing, releasing for supply, packing, labeling. This sounds far more like a pharmaceutical manufacture. And then in relation to a natural health product ingredient, procure it, including removing it from its natural state so as to make it into a product. So if you're growing lavender in your garden and you cut it because you're planning to put it into some lavender pillows, you're now manufacturing. Prepare it by expression, extraction, distillation, purification, or traditional preparation methods. So if you're putting something in some alcohol or some oil, and you're infusing that with the view to help with something. And this is, I think, that the confusion that some people have had. They've said, oh, well, you won't be able to get cinnamon anymore, or you won't be able to get aloe vera anymore. That's not true, but you won't be able to have some of these natural products that have got aloe vera is great to help sunburn. Cinnamon can assist with the balancing of blood sugars, because the moment you've got that, that's a medicinal claim. And whilst that might have been shown to be true for hundreds or thousands of years in its use, suddenly now that's going to be a problem, and you're going to have to apply for a license. The regulator is going to have to deem that that's going to be okay, and that the cost of that is just going to be prohibitive. So suddenly the manufacturers that have been able to do a lot of this stuff and make sure that they've got some, you can talk about may assist rather than will. So we can't make medical claims in New Zealand the way that you can in Australia, and they have the TGA, so the Therapeutic Goods Association. And what it appears to be happening is it looks like they're trying to create this bill to somehow be the New Zealand version, and they've just failed miserably. It also appears that they are sort of trying to put the skeleton and the infrastructure, and then they're going to flesh it out with the detail. And in order for this to go through, we don't know where that's going to lead, because they've left it wide open. The scope is so tremendous. And the lack of public consultation, the lack of translation, having somebody that, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a pharmacist, and so my interpretation of this may be wrong. But when I read it as it is, and I've gone through the notes, I find that this is, I come to some conclusions, and when I read the notes, I'm not brought to any better satisfaction.
Well, I've made several videos, and often what I'm having to make sure I repeat is, if my interpretation is correct, then we have this particular problem, because it is a very confusing bill.
Well, yeah. They talk about what a pharmacy business is and what pharmacy activity is, and they talk about veterinary stuff, and look, that's fine. I'm open to that. I understand that. For years, the pharmacy legislation about what a pharmacy is and how that carries on has needed to be updated. And of course, in recent years, they changed the way that a pharmacy could be owned, such that now that it's a very sort of murky area, and we've got the likes of the discounting pharmacies out there. And whilst it's supposed to be controlled by the owner of the pharmacy, some of the ownership laws have been massaged, so that whilst a pharmacist can only own up to 5 pharmacies, they can have minority shareholdings in as many pharmacies as they want. So if you get a bunch of pharmacists all getting minority shareholdings in a bunch of pharmacies, then suddenly that bunch own a whole pile. That does need to be tidied up. They've got good descriptions. So in the general policy descriptions, they've got some really good definitions. And if somebody wanted to have a look, in the first 50 pages, that's fine. But as you say, we've only got 12 hours to go. And so perhaps we need to actually be thinking about how we manage that. In Part 3, Section 71, or Clause 71, is a very interesting clause. In Clause 69, they talk about controlled activities and also prohibited activities. And they say that you must not carry out a controlled activity unless you have a license or permit or a provision under these various bits and pieces. And Clause 71 is the administering a natural health product by injection or parenteral infusion. And it simply says a person must not administer a natural health product to a person by injection or parenteral infusion. Now, there is another piece of this bill earlier on that defines what a natural health product is. And in there it says a natural health product is not, and one of the sections is, a product that is designed for injection or parenteral infusion. So I don't understand why in one place they've said if you're doing it for injection, it's not a natural health product, and here they say you shouldn't inject a natural health product. This could be your vitamin B12 injections. Now, then you could say, well, the ones that are on the pharmacy shelf are a registered medicine. Okay, but going forward, is that going to be the case? I have colleagues that have, and friends that have used vitamin C infusions and have found benefit in those. According to this, that's going to be off the table now. It doesn't even talk about an approved person or someone who's already applied and got a license and permission, a medical practitioner. It simply says a person.
We're not just talking about a bill where it might be harder to get a bottle of vitamin C from the shelves. It actually gags and prevents a lot of medical professionals. Would that be a fair comment?
Well, look, great question. And in fact, under enforcement, which is part 8, you know, I did a TikTok video a few days ago, and in there they talk about, so this is clause 252, offence for impermissible health benefit claims about natural health products. Now, I'm always very careful about what I say about natural health products, but I've had clients who've had an interest in some of those, and we've used them because ultimately, most natural health products, there's no harm. You know, the worst they can do is they don't do anything. And when someone says to me, are there any side effects? I say, well, the main side effect is good health, and which is the one that you want. So, but they talk in here that a person commits an offence if they make a claim, or the claim is a permitted health. They know that or are reckless as to whether the claim is a permitted health benefit claim for a natural health product. Now, the biggest problem, and William, you'll be familiar with this, is that most natural health products are cheap as chips. Most natural health products can be obtained yourself, and so to do the research with the randomised placebo-based crossover trials for 25,000, you know, double-blinded, the money's not there. And so, you know, it's all very well demanding the research, and yet, you know, Otago University's done some amazing work with vitamin C, as an example. But, you know, if you're talking about something and you misphrase a word, they're liable to a conviction if they're an individual of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years, or a fine not exceeding $200,000, or both, or otherwise a fine not exceeding $1 million.
It's just ridiculous.
I mean, if I went out and assaulted somebody badly, I'd be lucky to get 5 years. I certainly wouldn't get fined as well. You know, if you compare those sorts of enforcement penalties to other things out there, and when you consider the degree of harm that most of these things do, it's a nonsense. And the other tricky thing I believe with all of this is what's going to happen is that the only people that may be allowed to say some of these things are going to be medical practitioners. Most of them actually have very little nutritional training. Some of my doctored colleagues tell me they had 2 or 3 hours at best. I've had years and years and years. I've got colleagues and friends who are naturopaths and herbalists and other health providers, and they are certificated, they are associated with a well-known, reviewed organisation. They're not some backdoor hodgepodge that are doing their thing. These people are more qualified in their area than I am or you are in their particular genre. They are going to have their powers removed potentially by what's going on here. So you're going to have ill-equipped, ill-advised, ill-educated being allowed to make the decisions, and the people that actually know best are going to have their powers removed. Furthermore, and I know this to be true because this has happened over and over, and we've watched this with other things. We watched it with alcohol, we watched it with cannabis. A black market is produced. So suddenly, instead of having qualified, educated people who gave oversight, they're going to be shifted to one side and have their powers removed. the public are just going to make decisions about what they're going to be doing. They're going to be smuggling bits and pieces in. Sure, there's legislation in here about how you can bring things into the country. There's even, what you can do in your luggage, and the fact that if you're going to carry it in your luggage, it's actually for a person who's also with you. So you can't bring something back for Auntie. Auntie's got to take the trip with you. It's a nonsense. And then we get to the regulator. So this is somebody that's going to be appointed by the Minister of Health, and also, in fact, they're going to be checking in with the Minister of Health. There's no definition of how this regulator is going to be chosen. And as somebody who practices integrative medicine, which I'm a bit like a GP of natural health medicine, so I know a little bit about a lot of things. And integrative medicine is where you take standard medicine, allopathic, we'd call that. So that's your standard prescription medicines and all of your other health providers in one hand, and on the other hand you've got your naturopath and herbalist and other practitioners. Integrative medicine is this, so getting the best of both worlds rather than alternative medicine where you've got to make a choice between the two. If you've got this, where you've got a regulator, there is absolutely no way that this regulator is going to be able to have sufficient information to be able to make the decision. So what's going to happen? The big boys are going to have the say. And in fact, it's even been my experience in the natural health industry, there are some of the big boys. Metagenics, for instance, have given their support at this stage for this bill. And I wonder whether it's because they think, well, we're one of the big boys, we're TGA approved, so now we can actually, here's our chance to squeeze out all the little guys and be a big boy. Perhaps. It removes any innovation. So I've got family members who are involved in innovation. And Kiwi number 8 wire, we are innovative. And then again, I mentioned before about rongoa Māori. I'm just beginning to learn about that now. That is included in this bill. Now, if for some bizarre reason rongoa Māori gets removed from this bill and set aside because of, treaty requirements or there's other things that have to be taken into account, I would suggest then that all natural health products need to be taken out of this bill and treated as a separate entity. And honestly, I think that is the big thing to do, because this has been rushed in so quickly. There has been such little consultation. It is so broad in its descriptions. It's been poorly publicised. There is lack of clarity. Not to mention the fact that at the end, they throw in all this extra stuff as well. One of the things that I really don't understand is when they throw, because again they mention this being an omnibus bill, or as I would say, a platypus bill. So there's all these additional legislation that they are trying to throw out, manipulate or change. One of the things that they're doing, so here's an example of a confusing one. The Contraception, Sterilisation and Abortion Act 1977, they want to repeal Section 6. So I went and looked at what Section 6 is. Here it is here. It's standards for manufacture of condoms. I'm at a loss.
So for the lay person, what does that mean?
They say that they're putting that in there, they're repealing it, and I'm like, well, okay, so you've now taken the standards for the manufacture of condoms out of that particular act. There's nothing in there about what you're going to do instead. Why are you doing this? What is it for? There's no description about that whatsoever. Now that's only one example. There's, I think, roughly 25, 27 other bits of legislation in the back that they want to change. And it's sort of being tacked on at the end. I don't think it's going to get any discussion. And I think also there's so much happening in this bill. It's a little bit like the last 3 years where there's been so much happening, we haven't quite known when to focus. And, the Labour government was well known for getting legislation being passed at 3 and 4 in the morning when we were all asleep, or during lockdowns when we were all at home or doing what we needed to do. So I have real concerns that there are going to be massive fishhooks in this. I have real concerns that the natural health organisations that have, in principle, given their support to this bill, they either haven't read this bill properly, they haven't, which is understandable, it's a nightmare. I've spent hours and hours on this thing, and I still probably am only grasping the surface of it. And I also believe that maybe they're looking at it as creating some sort of advantage for them, which we can say is a human thing. We're always looking out for number one. But at the end of the day, I think if you get in bed with this sort of problem and not really knowing what you are about, if I can use the condom analogy, and unless you are safely wrapped, you are likely to pick up all sorts of nasty things you weren't actually expecting to get. So, you know, if individuals are wanting to know how to make a submission or an objection, because I've had feedback that, you know, if you make a submission, you're submitting. So feel free to call it an objection, that's fine. I would suggest that you would say, this, as I've said before, there's been a huge lack of public consultation. The bill is onerous and administratively unworkable. In order to implement this thing, the costs in terms of both human resources, so you're going to have to get extra lawyers, you're going to have to get extra people that understand it. Every time a manufacturer wants to do something, they're going to have to make sure that they comply with all the bits and pieces. So you're going to have experts to do that. All of that is a cost. That cost goes to the end consumer. We have an ill-equipped individual that we know nothing about. There's not going to be any consultation over the regulator, and they are going to be appointed. There's no description in there about the qualifications they require. So they could be some government official who just applies for the job and gets it. So they're not going to know what they're doing. There's no oversight in there in terms of getting any of the experts. They are alienating the very people that actually are giving, high quality advice, that are giving high quality oversight. Those people have been pushed to the side. Those that know very little, for some of this, they're being allowed to have some input. There's also some other bits though, like I mentioned about the intravenous vitamin C and these other things. They're in one part it says that's not going to be a natural health product, and another part it says you won't be able to do intravenous. So there's even these conflicts within the bill. There's all of these additional pieces of legislation that are not being discussed. And then we've got, this is it. It's been a short period of time. There's been no real public translation. And it's been left up to the likes of yourself and myself to try and educate people. But how do you communicate 287 pages in a way that somebody's going to sit there and listen? You know, I would perfectly understand if somebody's already switched off now because of all the gobbledygook I've been talking about. You can go and look at what other people have done for their submissions. I've had a look at a lot of them. You will always find that somebody's gone in from their angle, like I've seen chiropractors talking about how it's affected their chiropractic. Homeopaths, for instance, it mentions in the bill about very low dose products not being considered natural health products, but it also says that very low dose products, so these are things in the, I think it's 400, one part in 400, or 400 parts per million. So very, very tiny pieces, but you're not allowed anything from human or animal extract. And there are a number of homeopathic products that come originally from a human or animal extract. Now, of course, those that think that homeopathics are just a load of mumbo jumbo, well, they shouldn't be worried about this sort of thing at all, because apparently it's all mumbo jumbo. So why put it in there? I have to say that, again, first do no harm. And I have had situations where we've used homeopathics because we haven't been able to use medicines or natural health products in individuals. And in some cases, those patients have found benefit. That doesn't mean that this should be looked at the same as medicines. But when you're stuck, if you can't do any harm, why not?
Well, homeopathy is safer than drinking half a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice.
Correct.
So we do have to question the motives of this whole bill, and why is it so dramatic, and is it tied in with other international agendas? That's a story for another video, I think. I really value you making this all very clear for us, and you've said some really good points. But to conclude, is there anything you'd like to finalise with?
I think perhaps once you've watched this video, go back and watch it again, because as we've been talking, I've been thinking about the things that I've spoken about. But if you go through this video again and go through the various bits and pieces there, I think you'll find enough to be able to make a submission. And that might be a lot easier than spending hours and hours going through this. The other thing is that if you actually felt up to it and you wanted to go and speak and do a verbal submission, that is still, or objection, that is still available, that's coming. So if you were able to go and speak to that, that would be amazing. And between now and then, of course, you can have other individuals assist you with the information that you need. I'd also suggest that we stay on this. Even once the closing date at 11:59 p.m. this evening goes, we still want to be keeping an eye on what's been going on. And we also want to make sure that we tell as many people as possible, because even though only X number of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of submissions have been made, or objections, we still have the power in the people. So we need to make sure that we're still talking to our ministers and our members of parliament. We still need to be talking to other groups, and we need to be talking to our natural health providers and our allopathic providers, our doctors. Ask them what they know about it, and stay in touch. Keep talking.
Well, it sounds good. We should have had a barbecue much earlier. Then we could have got this video done a lot earlier rather than 12 hours from the close. No, well, thank you very much for watching, and thank you, Mark. All the details will be in the description. Thank you very much. Don't forget to share this video and tell everyone you can. Thank you.